other markets in order to push volume up. Over the years, I've done quite a bit of work, and what I've found is that different companies are doing different mix of things, but it's important to understand what are some of the outcomes. So if I take something like loyal customers, we hardly ever blame our sales and marketing people for reducing the risk for the company. But that's exactly what, if you can increase customer retention, customer loyalty, what have you done? You've made your customers less available to competition. And if your customer retention rate is higher, your cash flows in the future are more stable, and that is something your investors like. So it becomes really important to begin to visualize not just things, I need to look at the customer satisfaction metric, but the real question is, if I can take my customer satisfaction from 70 to 75%, does it lead to my customer loyalty increasing from 50 to 60%? And if it does, what's the financial impact of that? We need to start looking at these things and start worrying about things such as the lifetime value of customers. I've been given, the board is giving me the signal. I'm over my time, so I'll try to just wrap up really quickly. One of the points that I want to make is if you want to make money, there are multiple ways of making it. You can make money by having a more differentiated product. You can make more money by having an efficient supply chain. Or you can make more money by getting your customers to love you because you have the style and the brand. Similarly, if you want to speed up a cash flow, it's not only time to market, but is the market ready to accept you? We all queue up for Apple products, and they're sold, the new versions are sold out within a week. So it's really the ability to get customers to your store, just as it is important for you to get your product to the market. So with that, let me just summarize. There are many ways of innovating, and please, please, please do not get stuck with this notion that it is only product innovation or invention that is driving innovation. Singapore is very science, technology, engineering centric. I myself am an engineer, not by birth, but by training. And what I'm finding is that this belief that you build it and they'll come and you'll make money is not necessarily true. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raj. All right, ladies and gentlemen, up next, we have a very interesting topic. It's called Business Model Innovation in the Fourth Era of Innovation. If you're scratching your head, you're wondering what is it all about, then please give our next speaker a warm round of applause. Managing Partner of InnoSight, Mr. Scott D. Anthony. Scott, please take the stage and tell us a little bit more about your fantastic topic.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me back there? Can you wave and show that you're still awake in the back of the room? Thank you very much. Good morning. We're going to have a fun 20 minutes or so as I introduce you to a brief history of innovation and then talk about my view for why business model innovation is the imperative to succeed in innovation's fourth era, and then talk just a little bit about how you do it. So what I'm going to do is try to make the case that the best place in the world to be if you want to drive change and impact is inside an established company. Now, this might be a little bit like the Oscar Wilde line about second marriages, the triumph of hope over experience. Because if you look at the literature, it is quite daunting. In the 1980s, the seminal book on innovation, Richard Foster, The Attacker's Advantage, Why Leading Companies Abruptly Lose Their Markets. In the 1990s, the seminal book on innovation, The Innovator's Dilemma, by InnoSight's founder Clayton Christensen, talked about how new technologies cause great companies to fail. A more recent book, it gets more ominous as you go through time, The Innovator's Extinction, how best intentions and natural selection will drive your company into the grave. Paul Graham, the founder of an organization called Y Combinator, one of the leading incubators in the United States, described it like this. Running a startup, well, that's like getting punched in the face repeatedly, but working for a large company, that's like being waterboarded. So you look at all this and you say, how does that possibly support the notion that an established company is the place to be if you want to have impact? Well, to get you there, let me give you a brief history of innovation. I would argue that up until about today, there have been 3 defined eras of innovation. Before about 1900, it was the era of the lone inventor. During this era, innovation was affordable, it was accessible. Anyone could do it within their own garage or equivalent. Of course, you might ultimately form a company to scale your idea, but the magic rested in the individual. So I have here a picture of the incandescent light bulb. Most of you can probably immediately imagine Thomas Edison. I could show you the cotton gin and you would think of Eli Whitney. I could show you the printing press, you would think of Gutenberg. You can name the inventions to the individuals. Well, as the century turned, you had the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution. Henry Ford came along and showed the world the power of scale. As this began to happen, innovation began to grow out of the reach of the individual. The corporations were still open-minded in this period, so it began to lodge within the corporations. The magic happened within the corporate lab. So Procter & Gamble gives the world laundry detergent and disposable diapers. DuPont gives the world the miracle molecules. IBM gives the world System 360, and on and on and on. The magic happens inside the corporations. In the 1950s and 1960s, something began to change. Corporations began to ossify, just as individuals began to want to spread their wings, to want to go and rebel and do different things. You began to have people eject out of companies, find other like-minded rebels, and begin to create new organizations to attack the big giants of the day. Innovation was still expensive, so you had to have a new form of financing emerge to power all of this. So where did the magic happen in the third era? Very clearly in the venture-backed startup. Whether it was Apple or Google or more recently Facebook, the place to be if you wanted to change the world, the place to be if you wanted to have impact, was inside a venture-backed startup. What have these companies done to the world? As technology has progressed, I think we all accept the notion that the world is changing more quickly than it ever did before. It has never been easier to start a company. We have 2 parts to our business at Innosight. One part of our business, and this part is based in Singapore, is a venture capital investment fund. This idea that it's never been easier to start a company really hit home for me a couple years ago when we received a pitch from a company called Plunify. The idea was to democratize tools used for field programmable gate array chips. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it's a pretty big market. Some of you might participate in it. That has some billion-dollar companies in it. These 2 young guys had come up with an idea. They didn't just show us the idea. They showed us a functioning website. The website had early customers on it. They were earning early revenues. We asked them, who's giving you financial backing? Because if you've got a real company up and running, someone must have funded you. The 2 guys looked at us kind of sheepishly and said, well, we just used our credit cards to create this company. It cost about $500. That's what it takes to create a new business today. You can create a fully functioning, viable business for next to nothing. Now at this point, you might be scratching your head. I started this by saying an established company is the place to be if you want to drive impact. And here I am describing how you can start a company in the blink of an eye. Here's the challenge. Even though it's easy to start, the next step is perilously difficult. Imagine, I've described to you what Plunify is. I told you it costs $500 to start it. If any of you are passionate about field programmable gate array tool democratization, you could go out tomorrow and do the exact same thing. That's what life is like for a startup today. The second you get a whiff of success, the race is on. You're fighting off all these competitors. Yes, every once in a while you have a Facebook come around. Remarkable story. The company does not exist a decade ago, and today it's worth more than 100 billion US dollars. This is an incredibly rare exception. 75%. That is the percent of companies backed by venture capitalists, the creme de la creme of the startup world, that do not return a single cent to their investors, let alone any positive returns. 75%. I would argue that while it's never been easier to start a company, it has never been harder to build a business because of the massive intensity that you face in the early days of creating a business before you've had a chance to harden your processes, to develop unique assets, and so on. At the same time, something interesting is happening inside established companies. A select few, and it is still a select few, are figuring out a way to do something really special. They're combining together the unique assets that they have already created with just enough entrepreneurialism. And by doing so, they are transforming the world. Let me give you one example of this. Medtronic is the world's largest independent medical device manufacturer. It's based in the United States. It's about a $15 billion company. One of their core products is the pacemaker. This is a pacemaker being implanted, if my clicker works one more time, this is a pacemaker being implanted in India. This is an incredibly rare occurrence. Even though India has more heart disease than any country in the world, Medtronic's penetration in this market is tiny. It's not hard to understand why if you spend any time in India. The primary healthcare system is pretty much broken, so there isn't good diagnosis. And this device, the pacemaker, costs $1,000 US for the most basic model. And because India is largely an out-of-pocket pay market, most people simply cannot afford it. So a few years ago, a group in Medtronic, based out of its operations in Singapore, said we have to find a different way to approach this problem. So what did they do? Entirely business model innovation. The story I'm going to describe here has essentially no new technology in it. They found new ways to create, deliver, and capture value that is in the process of transforming the market. Here's one element. They found new ways to diagnose patients. Instead of relying on primary care facilities, they went out into rural areas where in an afternoon, 200-300 people at a time could get very quick diagnostics run to figure out if they had conditions that warranted seeing a specialist. They did direct-to-consumer marketing, which was never done before in the industry. And most interestingly, if you can read the local dialect here, they came up with a mechanism to make the pacemaker more affordable. Not by changing the price of it, but by creating what we think is the world's first financing program for an implantable medical device. Think about the challenges there. If I give you a loan to buy a car or to buy a house, and you don't pay off the loan, no problem. I give you a loan to have a device implanted in your chest, and you don't pay off the loan, it's a little hard to repossess the device. But Medtronic figured out how to do this, using the principles that have allowed microfinance to work, community pressure, and so on, that has allowed now, in the 3 years the program has been in market, to not suffer a single default from a single patient. This is the first customer that received an implant through this program, Healthy Heart for All. This is a 45-year-old widow who is suffering dizziness and blackouts. Her income was about $50 US per month. Without Healthy Heart for All, without this business model that Medtronic introduced, this person likely would have died. Today she's living, she's got a pacemaker, she's paying off the loan with support from her community, and it's a really nice ending here. Medtronic started this program in 2011, piloted it in a few hospitals, is now spreading it all throughout India, and ultimately plans to make it the standard of care for many emerging markets. And this isn't the only story I can tell like this. Nestle is another example of a company that's figured out a way, as we heard earlier, through Nespresso and Dolce Gusto, to create vibrant, powerful new businesses. I can talk about many other industries where established companies have figured out how to do something special. There's a common pattern to the story. Muhammad Ali said, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." What these companies are doing is using all the might and power that they have as an established company and combining it with just enough speed and agility of the startup. There's something else interesting in these stories. Every one of them that I have studied has a hero. The hero is rarely the CEO. The hero is usually someone a couple or 3 levels deeper in the organization. For example, that Medtronic story traces back to work started by Keane Monson when he was in Switzerland before he moved out to Singapore. When Monson started the project that became Healthy Art for All, he had exactly 0 direct reports. He figured out a way to bring together a coalition inside the company, to get external people to support the effort, and he did something unique. He didn't drive the change all himself, he catalyzed it, combining together a lot of different ingredients in a very powerful solution. So in my mind, this is the era of innovation we're entering today, the 4th era of innovation, the era of the corporate catalyst, where if you think and act the right way inside an established company, you can do some absolutely amazing things. This is the nature of innovation today. This is why I believe that established companies are the place to be if you want to have impact. So how do you do this? Now, I mentioned this Healthy Heart for All study for a reason. You note in that study there was absolutely no new technology. It was a new way to diagnose, a new way to market, a new way to finance. It was a new business model. This is what catalysts do in innovation's 4th era. Sure, continue to invent new technologies, continue to figure out new products, continue to figure out new services, but surround them with business models that really unleash change. If you look at what really causes companies to have impact, from the A of Amazon to the Z of Zara, you will see behind it business model innovation, everything in between Google and Tencent as well. Let me pause on Amazon for a minute. What has allowed Amazon to be so successful? In my mind, it is because Amazon is a relentless business model innovator. It starts with its core offering. If you take apart Amazon's income statement, it doesn't look like a traditional retailer, because traditional retailers have big working capital and inventory and so on. Amazon actually, in its financial statements, looks like a company that is selling subscriptions, because they get paid by their customers before they ever even start talking to their suppliers. They manage their supply chain with such efficiency that they have negative days working capital in their core business. A highly disruptive business model that allows them to prosper at price points that traditional retailers can't dream of competing against. But Amazon doesn't stop there. It is restless and relentless in creating new business models. Whether it's a subscription offering like its Prime offering, which is now a multi-billion-dollar offering, everything it's done on the e-reader side, or in my mind, most interestingly, what it has done to become the world's largest provider of cloud computing solutions. In this case, a product manager within Amazon said, we've built these great IT systems to run our own business. What if we turn this into a profit center? What if we start taking all this capacity we created and essentially renting it first to small businesses to help them manage some of the intricacies of their technology, where instead of having to make fixed investments, they can make variable investments instead. They begin innocently with relatively small businesses. Today, they're providing the systems for sophisticated organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency, a multi-billion-dollar offering based, again, on a highly disruptive business model. If you want to understand what it takes to be a truly great company, the answer in almost all cases is the business model. This is a list of 29 companies that appear on at least 2 of the 4 major lists of the world's most innovative companies. MIT has a list, the Boston Consulting Group has a list, Fast Company has a list, Forbes has a list. 29 make it onto at least 2 lists. There's only 3 that make it onto all 4. Apple, believe it or not, is not one of those companies. You've got Amazon, who we already talked about, Google, who you might think of as being a search company, but in fact is one of the most disruptive business models the world has seen with its new approach to advertising, and Tencent, based in China, which is one of the few internet companies that actually does not make the bulk of its money from advertising. Tencent, through WeChat and QQ, makes most of its money through microtransactions. Very different, very powerful business model. So in the 4th era, corporate catalysts can drive massive change. The way to drive massive change is through business model innovation. Let me end by describing, at least at a high level, what it takes to actually do this. Now, there are a lot of schools of thought in innovation, whether it's design thinking or user-centered design or whatever you want to call it. But as I've looked across them, in my mind, they're all basically saying the same thing. There are 3 steps in the innovation journey. There's the step where you go discover an opportunity, you then blueprint an idea to realize that opportunity, and then you find some way to de-risk it. You prototype, you test, you iterate, you adapt. Now, I put numbers in this, 1, 2, 3, but innovation is not linear, we know that. We know this is an iterative, integrative process, where in any stage of the journey, we're looking forwards and looking backwards. What I want to do over the next couple minutes is show you an individual who I think provides the most useful advice for each stage of the process, and describe what you can go and do about it. Market discovery, the first phase of the process. The guidance here is from A.G. Lafley, the chairman and CEO of Procter & Gamble, the man widely and appropriately credited with reigniting that company's ability to grow through innovation. Back when he was in his first run as CEO in 2000, the way he did this was by driving in the organization this simple 3-word mantra you see on your screen: consumer is boss. He had found that his organization had lost its way. You think of P&G as being this fantastically market-centric organization. But AG, when he came back from spending time in Japan in the late 1990s, found an organization that had turned inside, spending all of its time in meetings, looking at their BlackBerrys, looking at computer screens. He said, if we are truly to win, what we have to do is to invest the time to understand the customer better than they understand themselves, which means spending time in market, living with customers, working alongside customers, observing customers, never asking them what they want, because customers cannot adequately tell you what they want, but trying to understand them at a very deep level. So in the market discovery phase, the key is to have that consumer is boss mindset and invest the time to really understand the fabric of the market. That gives you the inspiration. How do you then turn that into an idea? The best guidance here is from the great artist Pablo Picasso, who once said, good artists copy, great artists steal. We sometimes think that in innovation, we're measured by how creative our idea is, how different our idea is, how original our idea is. In my mind, innovation is something very simple. It's something different that creates value. You want to find the shortest path to creating value that you can. To do that, you follow Picasso's advice. You recognize that somewhere in the world, someone has already solved the problem that you're facing. Your job is to find that person and borrow from them. They might not be in your industry, they might not be in your company, they might not be in your country, but they are there. You follow the Picasso guidance and it short circuits the path to doing something that creates value. You then have a raw idea. We know that every idea is partially right and partially wrong. It is impossible to have a perfect idea in the beginning. So what you do next, we're going to use another boxer here, is follow the guidance from the great American philosopher, actor, and occasional boxer Mike Tyson, who once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. The difference between successful innovators and failed innovators isn't how smart they are, it isn't how much planning they've done, it's what they do once they get punched. The reality is you want to be a good scientist. You want to recognize that there's uncertainty in your idea. You bring that to the fore, you develop a hypothesis around it, you run a test, you figure out what's wrong, and you begin to course correct to figure out what you're going to do next. Consumer is boss to give you the idea, good artists copy, great artists steal to turn that into something real, and everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face to recognize that you're going to have to try and sometimes stumble and fail before you succeed. Archimedes once said, you give me a platform and a lever long enough and I can move the world. Innovation can be your lever. The great assets you already have inside your companies can be your platform. I truly believe that sitting within this room here, sitting within the great companies that exist in Singapore and this part of the world, lies the power to catalyze massive change. Our world still has big problems. We've got to feed 7 billion people. We've got to provide health care to billions more. We need to spread education. We need to deal with social problems and so on. and I'm hopeful that some of the things that I've introduced today can help you on your journey. I thought I'd end by just showing you a little bit more information about how to find me. This is my next book that's coming out next year. I do get a small chance to do a shameless plug, The First Mile, launch manual for getting great ideas into the market. None of what I talked about here today is made up. It's all well documented in books and articles and so on that we have written. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, please find me, whether it's through Twitter or through my blog over at Harvard Business Review, or even email me, and maybe see you later today. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Up next, ladies and gentlemen, we have the founder of Business Innovation Culture, Ms. Christine Ustrup, who's going to basically share with us trending Asia's innovation culture. Christine, please take the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, now we're going to have a quieted exercise. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow morning. Life is normal. Okay, it's Saturday, but imagine it's a normal work day, Monday morning, and you wake up and there's something next to you on your bedside table. Something like this little box. You're like, hey, that's strange. I didn't notice that when I went to bed. You take the box and you're kind of like you're still sleeping, you open it. And inside is a key. And you think, key? What am I supposed to do with that key? And there's also a note. So you open a note and you read. Effective immediately. Your right to remain in your current job will be directly tied to your ability to drive and win tonight's race at the F1 circuit in Singapore. Signed by your chairman. Your time is limited. How are you going to win an F1 race? How will you prepare? You have one day. Actually a weekend in this case. Okay, to give you a couple of moments, write down, think about it. I will show you a video of how it feels like to be inside an F1 race.
Except Germany.
He needs to cover Button straight away, and that's fine. He's not had a great start. Button leads the Grand Prix. Hamilton's on the inside. He's through. Hamilton takes the lead. The seventh different winner of 2012.
Restart time is 30 minutes. Okay, it's time to push, time to push.
Lewis Hamilton in the wall. He's out of the European Grand Prix.
Try to stick with Hamilton to give it everything these tires have got now. Box, box, box. Turning on.
Oh, fantastic.
Mark is coming in as well.
Front wing surely damaged. Whoa! Sebastian Vettel wins again. Pole position. That was some kind of dominant performance. Lewis Hamilton wins brilliantly.
You will be waiting for the exit.
First now.
Is everything okay? Everything okay?
Listen, everything is good. Everything is good.
Well, my friends, how will you prepare? Any brave suggestions? Mr. Lamb? You will play video games all over the weekend. That's a great suggestion. Any others? Mr. Scott, how do you win the game, the race? Finding somebody else. That's called outsourcing. That will get you disqualified in this, in this race. But it's a great suggestion. Any other ones? I asked a group of general managers recently, and you know, the best suggestion was going to the gym. I was like, why are you going to the gym? And it's like, well, racing drivers are very fit. And then he said, but I have another idea. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, you can also go and sabotage all the other competing teams' cars. I won't name the company. There's many ways, and the thing is that when you have little time, the truth always comes out. In fact, there are 3 essential components to prepare if you were going to win the race. In racing, it would be you and your other drivers, your fellow drivers. It would also be, of course, finding the best car out there. And, of course, your team, your pit crew, the ones that will keep you on track, they will warn you of the dangers ahead, they will keep your car fueled, and they will change your tires when needed. In the racing world, no matter what happens, these 3 essential components are essential. And you know what? It's the same thing in business. In business, we also have first the leadership, secondly, the tools, the processes, and thirdly, your employees. And these 3 components is what makes up your company culture. 4 types of company culture are generally identified. First, you have the type called laggards and crisis. Those are slow, they have been slow to move ahead in terms of innovation and growth, and they generally face the possibility of closure. And then we have the traditional corporate. These companies whose past successes led them to a positive level of growth and size, but now face getting stuck because of the rigidity of their structures. And as examples, we might think of Sony or Microsoft. Then we have the pioneers. The pioneers are those companies that have overcome the structures and of the corporate structure, but generally not across the board. There are some components that are operating well, but there's the others that are challenging. And you might think of Samsung and Toyota as a good example of pioneers. And finally, of course, on the top right corner, you will find the world-class innovators. Those are the special companies that have managed to move forward with components, employees, tools and processes that allows them to innovate again and again and again. Here, everyone thinks of Google, but I'd like to think of Nike. I come from fashion. And Nike is a company that is not, it's a manufacturing company like you. It's not a technology company, but they've managed to innovate again and again. There's also a great example of business model innovation from Asia, which is Alibaba, the e-commerce platform from China, that are now, if you've seen the latest news, they're actually entering banking sector. I've been speaking with a few bankers here in Singapore, and you know, they're all deadly scared that companies like Alibaba will come in and take over their businesses. Because when we compare those levels, we find that most companies of today are in that red ocean. They are either laggards or traditional corporates. So what are those global trends that are supporting the push from corporate to innovation culture? It basically means going from big is better to better is better. I won't go into details here, but what's really interesting, if you look at the blue list, 6 out of 9 of the trends that we are seeing coming in the future are what we could describe as traditional Asian values. Things like holistic thinking and long-term planning. What we will see is that the future business culture that will succeed is a fusion between modern Western thinking and traditional Asian philosophies. which is very great news for people who have, especially their presence in Singapore, which is a mix of the two. However, having an innovation culture, where does it lead you to? Obviously, it leads you to somewhere, and that somewhere is innovation results. As we heard a lot about today, generally people agree that there are 3 different kinds of innovation results. One is the product innovation, which is most famous, and then there's the operation innovation, which is often linked to productivity and cash savings. And the third one is what we are here for today, is the business model innovation. However, sometimes people forget that to have the innovation results, we need the culture as an input. And also, people forget that, in fact, having an innovation culture is not just a benefit for the HR people, which is often the ones that are tasked with it. In fact, we have 6 major results, ranging from 66% of young people that want to work in companies that are very innovative, to the innovation premium that we're inventing today, to also, which I think is very important for everyone here, is that the innovation culture is very much linked to productivity gains. In fact, there's been studies that where you take top spenders in R&D that are really efficient and really good with productivity, and you then take top 10 innovators. The top 10 innovators make 22% higher EBITDA or better financial results. So often the missing link between being good and being great is really coming from the culture and the mindset and the people. Just in case that you're not convinced, let's take a few examples of companies that didn't move in this race, that were being seriously challenged, or who are doing remarkably well despite all odds. Everyone knows Kodak. That's a spectacular crash. In fact, what you may not know is that they were the first to invent the digital camera technology. They just didn't use it. And they let Canon and Minolta take over, and as a result, Kodak went bankrupt in 2012. There's another example here, which is maybe not crashing, but they have been spinning a little out of control recently. BlackBerry's stock has just dropped about 33%, so they may pay in penalty rounds if they're not careful. I was just wondering in this setting, how many of you are still using a BlackBerry? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. How many of you are using iPhones or Samsungs? Oh, okay, 90%. So you see, the thing that went wrong with BlackBerry was not that they didn't have the technology, they had the technology. They just didn't change their business model when Apple came in and went with all the apps. And hence, they're suffering now. On the positive side, though, there's a great example here coming from Four Seasons in Singapore. They put together a group of employees and tasked them or asked them to become innovation champions and come up with innovative ideas. And one of the ideas they came up with was taking their business hotel in Singapore and introducing the idea that one of the floors became a couples-only floor. It didn't cost them much to create this couples experience-only floor. Actually, they had some pretty cheap but wild ideas. One of them they mentioned was putting condoms in the minibar, which I'm not sure if they did that or not. But they did, roses on the bed and a lot of other romantic things that were really cheap. However, this idea generated $2 million additional revenue in the first 6 months, coming up from the employees only without any investment. Hardly. And one of my favorite examples is this one. This is called Airbnb. They basically let you stay in other people's homes. And they have now managed to have 10 million people staying in other people's homes. In fact, in New York, today, in any given day, there's more people staying in Airbnb rooms, other people's homes, than in hotels. So obviously, this fact has got quite a few people worried, including the hotel industry. So, any guesses of how the New York hotel industry has reacted? Lawsuits. Let's put the lawyers on those young startups. They're not so young anymore, but let's put the lawyers on. And that is exactly what, you remember back in the 90s, end of the 90s, when Napster came up and the music industry was saying, let's put the lawsuits on, let's shut down the internet. So nobody can share free music, right? That we're not quite successful, so to say. Let's take a couple of minutes to look at the reasons for why you may not have been thinking about innovation culture, and also why so many brilliant, clever, highly educated business leaders are not investing and thinking and breathing more in their culture. Again, let's look at this based on each of the three components. The ones you can control and develop. On the level of leadership, the first challenge comes from who's in charge. Who exactly will that person be? We looked at internally at a small survey that we did on LinkedIn, where we surveyed how many people have innovation as part of their job title. We did it on Singapore, and then we did it, there was nobody. And then we did it on Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, so forth, still less than 1,000. Then we included Japan and China, Taiwan, still less than 1,000. Then we took India, still less than 1,000. Basically, we took the whole of Asia to see how many people had innovation as part of their job title. And it was less than 1,000. And then we did California, and whoops, it was more than 3,000 people. So of course, what happens is then everyone is supposed to be in charge of innovation. In fact, nobody's in charge. The second challenge is that there are generally no tools to measure and assess your culture. So no tools means that you don't know how fast you're driving or whether your fuel level is full or not. And this means that, for example, if you don't have enough fuel, you might be going too slow, or if you're driving too fast, you may overheat. Finding the right balance through data and assessment, checks and balances will be key. Just like you have done in the productivity journey, you will use not the same tools, but you will also have to use tools and processes and KPIs